Woe be unto him who opens one of the 7 gateways to hell, because through that gateway evil will invade the world.
Lucio Fulci's The Beyond is one of the most fascinating, unique, disturbing, and grotesque, yet somehow beautiful films I have ever seen. The film is defined by its utterly insane kill sequences, none of which make any sense, but all of which will stick with you for the rest of your life due to their extreme gore and impressive practical effects. But the film is also unforgettable for many other reasons, such as its incredibly beautiful and haunting soundtrack, its dreamlike atmosphere, and its often outstanding cinematography. Despite all of these positive aspects, The Beyond is often the subject of ridicule due to its seeming complete lack of a coherent story. To some degree, I believe that this is a perfectly valid criticism. The Beyond does not rely on its story, and it is certainly not the focus. The story of The Beyond, this being the idea that a gateway to hell opens up beneath a hotel, serves the purpose primarily of giving an explanation for why the characters in this movie are about to have their eyes gouged out by the undead demons, or be eaten alive by spiders, or have their face melted off by acid. If you go into The Beyond hoping for a character-driven plot, you're going to be disappointed. The point is that, like in many of Fulci's movies, you're there for the kills, the music, and the atmosphere, not the plot. With that said, however, I believe that there is an extremely potent story and message to The Beyond that is never explicitly acknowledged in the film, but is absolutely present. In order to understand the message of The Beyond, I believe we must first talk about Fulci himself and what his filmography as a whole can tell us about his worldview. I argue that there are 2 overarching themes to Fulci's movies, themes that he seems to have an absolute obsession with. These are death and control. When I say that Fulci is obsessed with death, I do not say this simply because his films are horror and have death sequences. No, it goes further than that. So many of Fulci's films explore the dead themselves. Zombie, City of the Living Dead, House by the Cemetery, and indeed The Beyond all explore what it means to die, and ask the question, what happens when we die? Zombie, as the title suggests, shows the dead rising from their graves, resurrected to crave and tear the flesh of the living. City of the Living Dead shows the dead returning as supernatural entities, capable of causing people to vomit up their insides just by staring at them. And in The Beyond, each character who is killed ends up coming back into the film as a sentient corpse intent on increasing the body count further. In summary, the dead do not stay dead in Fulci's movies. The dead do not get to rest. When it comes to the victims in Fulci's films, their behavior is so often unrealistic and inexplicable. When characters are dying, they act as if they have no control over their situation. Characters make feeble attempts to defend themselves, such as the girl who gets her eyes splintered in Zombie, where the audience inevitably asks themselves why her arms dangle at her sides instead of using them to defend herself. In some cases, characters act as though they are completely helpless, such as the man who lies on the floor completely motionless while he is devoured by spiders. It is easy to criticize Fulci for this and accuse him of lazily writing the victims to be as idiotic as possible, just to make his elaborate death sequences work. To this, I have a couple responses. First, Fulci's movies are unrealistic in a number of ways, and I believe that this is purposeful on his part in order to give his films a dreamlike quality. Secondly, and most importantly, I believe there is a very meaningful reason that Fulci, as it were, paralyzes the victims in his films. Anyone who has examined the life of Lucio Fulci can tell you that his life had more than its share of tragedies. From the suicide of his wife to the death of one of his daughters in a car accident, Fulci experienced unbelievable horrors. Most importantly, for the sake of this discussion, however, was the incident in which his daughter became paralyzed after falling off a horse. All of this created a life for Fulci that was filled with not only death, but also a life that undoubtedly made him feel a lack of control over his circumstances. He couldn't control the world and save his daughter from paralyzation, nor could he stop the death of his wife or daughter. I believe that it is this tragic life that prompted Fulci to write the death sequences in his films the way that he did. The victims in his movies are helpless, they lack control, they lack the ability to move, and most importantly, their deaths don't make sense. This is by design. Imagine the pain of having a loved one die in a car accident. you would think about how it doesn't make sense, about how they didn't deserve it, about how it's not fair that the world did this to them. That is the feeling that the deaths in Fulci's films evoke. It is the feeling that the world is unfair and gives no explanations for its inequalities. It goes even deeper than this, however. I believe that Fulci intends to communicate that the world is indifferent to the horrific outcomes of its senseless inequality. Because the victims of his films behave so abnormally and react so minimally to the horrific events happening to them, it leaves the viewer with little sense of emotional investment in the character's well-being. Of course, the violence on screen is unbelievable, and you are affected by the violence itself, but the character that it is happening to is made to feel like a helpless, faceless victim of a cruel world. Regardless of whether or not it works for you personally, I believe it is undeniable that Fulci creates a truly unique relationship between the audience and the victims of his movies that no other horror director achieves. Fulci does not write faceless characters. The characters have personalities, they have quirks, they have a sense of humor, they have flaws, but when it comes time for their death, it is as though their personality and autonomy is stripped away. All that is left during their death sequence is their inexplicably defenseless body that Fulci will treat with as much horrific violence as his mind will allow. To summarize what I have said so far, Lucio Fulci makes death itself impersonal, illogical, and destabilizing, and I believe that this is the case in part due to the tragedies in Fulci's life making him develop such a perspective. Fulci explores death by presenting a myriad of possibilities of not only how we can die, but what will happen to us when we die. I believe that what makes the Beyond Fulci's most interesting and morbid exploration of death is that it not only explores death itself, but the state of being dead. While it is true that other movies of his, namely City of the Living Dead and Zombie, thoroughly explore a horrific possibility of how the dead may act, these films do not explore what it means to be dead. There is a motif present in the Beyond in the form of a quote, and this quote, for me, is the most haunting, badass, and unforgettable quote in the history of cinema. Anyone who has seen the Beyond likely already knows what I'm referring to. On two separate occasions, a deep, godlike voice begins to speak. We never see who or what is speaking, and we never see the characters hear or react to the voice. This is fitting given that the main theme song for The Beyond is titled Voci dal Nulla, which translates to Voice from Nowhere. On both occasions, this unseen voice delivers the same line.
And you will face the sea of darkness, and all therein that may be explored.
That clip is the first time we hear the voice, which happens at the beginning of the final act of the film. If you're like me, the first time you heard this quote, the biggest emotion you felt was confusion, and rightfully so. The quote does not make much sense when you take it at face value. Before I explore the quote in detail, however, I want to talk about the ending of The Beyond, which will allow me to tie all of this together. The finale of the film sees our two main characters entering the basement of the hotel. As the film's premise reveals to us, the hotel is built over a gateway to hell, and this gateway has opened in the basement. The two characters enter this gateway, and once inside, the hotel from which they came vanishes, and there is nothing but desolation and corpses all around them. They are trapped in hell. Suddenly, both characters bear witness to something horrifying off-screen, at which point their eyes become whited out, blinding them. The godlike voice returns once again to deliver the line.
And you will face the sea of darkness, and all therein that may be explored.
As their bodies suddenly vanish into nothingness. This ending, in my view, is one of the most incredible endings in horror history. The amazing and unique depiction of hell that was all done practically, combined with the amazing score from Fabio Frizzi, is both beautiful and horrifying. But I believe that Fulci is also communicating an important message through this ending and the quote from the unforeseen voice. The quote is unnerving for many reasons, but the biggest reason by far, in my judgment, is that it doesn't make sense. More than that, it is contradictory and even paradoxical. The godlike voice declares that we will be in a sea of darkness, and declares that we will face all there is to explore in this sea of darkness. What I believe makes this so unsettling is simply this: a sea of darkness can't be explored. In a sea of darkness, there is nothing to explore. Given that this quote is said for the first time while a painting of hell is on screen, and for the second time as soon as the main characters enter hell, which is an afterlife of sorts, I believe that this quote should be interpreted as a message about the afterlife. Looking at this quote as being about the afterlife, the Sea of Darkness becomes a description for the afterlife, and the declaration that we will explore it comes to represent the idea that we retain some level of sentience and existence in this afterlife. However, the problem once again is that there is nothing to explore in a Sea of Darkness. A Sea of Darkness is, to put it harshly, nothing more than an eloquent way of describing nothingness. Therefore, when the godlike figure says this quote, it is making a contradictory statement, in which the afterlife is both something to be explored and yet is simultaneously nothing at all. More broadly, this quote asserts that there both is and isn't an afterlife. If this sounds far-fetched, I believe that what we can see in the ending of The Beyond makes my belief far less extreme. When the protagonists first enter hell, they exist in a dimension of the afterlife. In other words, when they first enter hell, there is an afterlife. Yet all around them there is nothingness. There are no living beings that the characters nor the audience can see. There is only what appears to be corpses all around them. Despite being in what is supposedly a kind of afterlife, there is no life to be found. There is only the dead. Then, when the characters do finally see something, they become blinded. They are in the afterlife, yet they can see nothing, and aside from the corpses all around them, there is nothing to touch, nothing to feel, nothing to taste, and nothing to hear. Once again, despite them being in what is believed to be the afterlife, there is nothing around them but death. Finally, as the godlike voice speaks its prophecy once again, the main characters vanish. Their existence quite literally shatters in the one place where it is believed that life goes on, the afterlife. The contradiction in the unseen voices quote is also present in the film's very ending. Our characters both exist and don't exist in hell. They both see and don't see anything. They see an afterlife, yet this afterlife is composed of nothing but the dead. They are exploring, yet what they are exploring is a sea of darkness, nothingness. And when they quite literally fade out of existence, we are left to wonder if these characters have retained any kind of sentience. Are they exploring a sea of darkness somewhere else? And if all they have to explore is a sea of darkness, is there anything at all? If there is an afterlife, is it simply nothingness? And if the afterlife is nothingness, why call it an afterlife?
And you will face the Sea of Darkness, and all therein that may be explored.